Our next guest comes from a prize-fighting lineage and history that is as legit as it gets. His father helped form a legendary sanctioning body in the boxing world that has been renowned and respected for nearly 6 decades. He is the son of a legendary advocate for boxing and is leaving a legacy his father would be proud of. He is the current president of the World Boxing Council and fight game visionary, President Mauricio Sulaimán.
Welcome to Title Unboxed. With more than 40 years of experience in the fight game, our host, Doug Ward, will be covering every corner of the ring as we get comfortable between the ropes. We'll talk with both the lesser knowns and the legends, discuss boxing's rich history and current state of the game. We'll also look at today's latest innovations, equipment breakdowns, and insights you won't uncover anywhere else. Join us now as we take a look inside Title Unboxed.
President Sulaimán, welcome to Title Unboxed.
Doug, I'm very happy to be in this great program and honored to be and participate on it.
Same. Thank you for joining us. You've had, in spite of the lockdown and everything, it looks like you've had a busy time. I obviously follow you and the WBC on social media, and you recently were honored with Mexico's National Sports Award for 2020. Congratulations.
Thank you very much. It's been a challenging time to all in humanity. Fortunately, we have a great team in the WBC. We decided to take the bull by the horns, to understand the situation and to become active. So ever since the lockdown was imminent, we teamed up and planned a series of activations which have been very successful, and I'm very happy and proud, and I'm very thankful for my whole team.
When you were able to pull off a huge undertaking in that you had the 58th annual convention the first time virtually. What was that experience like?
Well, it was crazy. Our conventions are the most important boxing event in the whole year. Right. Why? Because it is the community of the sport getting together, promoters, managers, trainers, so many champions, media, and of course the commissioners and the associate members of the WBC. We get together for a week. So we do this in Japan, in the Philippines, in Mexico, in Las Vegas. This year we were going to St. Petersburg, Russia. Yeah. We were expecting to have the greatest convention ever. And when it became imminent that there was not going to be a possibility due to COVID-19 restrictions, travel restrictions, and safety, we decided, while many others simply canceled their events, we decided to proceed. So we teamed up and we put a lot of effort, sleepless nights, great planning, and the end result, when we turned around, it was live. So when we opened the door, it was a dark room. I didn't know if it was going to be a little gathering of friends or a huge happening, and it turned out to be a huge happening. The end session was nostalgic. We had that same feeling when we go in a convention. We say goodbye, we hug each other, and then we go home. Yeah. We all had that same feeling, so it was a success.
Yeah. Well, we were there last year at Cancun, and it's just it's a great assemblage of champions and information and knowledge, everything from how to wrap your hands to, recognizing some of the greats like Julio Cesar Chavez. I mean, and it looks like this past year was as impactful, just, more one-dimensional.
We had a few very emotional moments. Mm-hmm. And that's the key. When you have a convention, when you have an event, there has to be that human factor, that emotional moments when you see people cry, yeah, and you see people laugh and you see people celebrate. And one of those moments was we had Bridger Walker, yeah, the kid who saved his sister from an attack of a dog. Yeah. We had him, we named him the bravest man on earth with a championship belt. And we had him at the closing ceremony. And Mike Tyson, Marvelous Marvin Hagler, and Jose Carlos Ramirez, the current super lightweight champion, they were talking to him live. So, of course, his father was more thrilled, but the kid was just amazing. It's a great story.
It's a fantastic story, and what a great experience for him. One I'm sure he'll remember forever.
Yes, and we have surprises for Bridger. We still have things coming up because this is the beauty of the WBC. It's a family.
Yeah.
When you're a champion, you are forever a champion. And the WBC is for the boxers before, during, and after the championship years. So we do not forget. We continue communications with most of the community. And it is just very gratifying to have friends all over the world and to be always in contact.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I want to start by, I don't want to assume all of our viewers and listeners are familiar with exactly what role the WBC plays in boxing and all that you do for the sport. So if you don't mind, if you just start out with the basic history and kind of give our viewers and fans an idea of what the WBC actually does on a day-to-day basis for the sport of boxing.
Sure. The WBC was created in 1963. And since its inception, the idea was and continues to be to make boxing safer, to make boxing fairer and better for the fighters. So throughout the years, we have dedicated countless hours of effort and time, resources for medical research. We partnered with UCLA back in 1978. We donated over $1 million at that time for the brain research. And that information led to changes that today nobody knows where they came from. The WBC reduced from 15 to 12 rounds the championship bouts. Why? Because it was proven medically what happens in the body when you are dehydrated, when you are fatigued, and when you're getting punched. So the reduction from 15 to 12 rounds has saved many lives and has saved the lives of those fighters who fight and end their career and they can live a decent, honorable life. Right. We changed the day of the weigh-in from one day, day of the fight to one day before, and countless of changes that we have introduced to the boxing world. What we basically do every day, we have representatives all over the world. One committee is the ratings committee. So they monitor results, they monitor activity, and they report it to the center database. And then they meet once a month to come up with the monthly ratings. The championship committee is in charge of the administration of each division, the mandatory fights, the voluntary defenses, appointment of ring officials, having communications with the promoters, with the local boxing authorities, etc. The Board of Governors is in charge of creating an action plan for the year, which we do at the convention. And then throughout the month, we just work on the different plans that we have set forth, and then we monitor the advance and we modify and we change. So the WBC does many, many things outside the ring. We are not just a ranking organization that presents a belt to the winner to be recognized as a world champion. To the contrary, we have many different committees that perform activities every week, every month, every year. And for example, our social responsibility programs are very extensive. We do programs all over the world. We visit children's hospitals, schools, gymnasiums. We bring champions and members of the WBC to lend a motivation, a warm message to those who are struggling. We have so many campaigns, anti-bullying. We have ambassadors all over the world going out to schools, to teachers, to parents, to neighborhoods, talk about bullying. We have integration programs of police with society. We have programs for jails. We put boxing programs in jails and the way they change their life and their families, and then the reintegration to society when they come out of jail is unbelievable. I don't know if you're familiar with Joe Dispenza. He's Dr. Dispenza is a guru in the scientific field and the motivational field. Right now, we are almost finishing a 6-week program in which he has spoken live to 7 different penitentiaries in Mexico, different states, and in Argentina. So it's a tremendous program that has great success. So we take care of boxing from the beginnings, from the roots, even from the amateurs, when the fighter is active, and when he has retired, we are there for any boxer and any member of the community.
Well, and that really is something that sets the WBC apart. You're not only in the boxing community, you outreach into the rest of the community, the world community. And you brought up a couple of interesting requirements or things that revolutionized the sport of boxing, that being the length of fights. But you also introduced the fourth ring rope, right? And thumb attached gloves, which obviously being in the equipment industry, that greatly impacted us.
Yes, the rings used to be 3 ropes, and they were very tight always. There was no guidelines for equipment, no guidelines for the ring, no guidelines for the gloves, for the taping, etc. So over the experience, my father and his colleagues throughout the years, they had to experience accidents in the ring.
Right.
The lower rope was a murderous weapon, because if a fighter falls into that lower rope, being very rigid, it was just an immediate accident and even death. So the WBC introduced the 4th rope, which makes each rope go be in a less space, and the lower rope has to be very loose. So there's a cushion when you fall into the ropes. The thumb attached, it took many injuries, to the retina. Some fighters were experts to use the thumb, not accidentally, but intentionally. And this process was, it took years, and Reyes' family developed finally the thumbless, because there was one that it was developed, and it was a glove, but you had the thumb inside, but you had no movement.
Yeah, it was attached like that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like that. Exactly. So with the thumb attached, it keeps the movement, it keeps the flexibility and the protection, and so many things. We have a program for evaluation and registration of boxing gloves, the equipment. We have so many hand wrapping seminars throughout the world, and it's just a matter that it has to be a continuous improvement to the so many things that we do.
Yeah, which is important. The hand wrapping is always, it seems like it's always controversial. I mean, today even we're running into that.
Yeah, we have tried to implement many different protocols. But for example, in the United States, each boxing commission is independent.
Right.
So you might have one protocol, and in California, which is different in Nevada, different in New York, different in Texas. And when the WBC proposes protocols, it not always is taken as a good faith, supportive item for everyone to improve. But then you go to Japan, it's a different protocol. Then you go to Mexico, the Philippines, the UK. So it's a challenge to continue working these programs and not feel discouraged and just simply put them down. Yeah. We have people working continuously to try to make boxing better in these matters.
Yeah. I do want to come back to that too, and talk about consistency within the boxing commissions and the role you play working with them and getting some of these things in there. But all these rules that revolutionized the sport, did those come? Your father, the distinguished Dr. Jose Sulaimán, he was elected president in what, 1975?
1975, exactly.
And those all came about when he came into the WBC, correct?
Yes, he was born into boxing because his friends were fighters. So when he was 8, 9 years old, he wanted to go see them fight. He had no money to pay the ticket, so they told him, "Well, you go in, but you have to participate in the appetizer." He didn't know what the appetizer meant. In Mexico, there's a custom that before the boxing card begins,
Yep.
they throw kids into the ring and they fight like appetizer.
Yep. Yep.
So my father went in, they took the shirt off, put some gloves, sent them into the ring, and he was there saying, "My God, I have to fight a kid who I don't know. He has not done anything to me. I'm going to have to fight him." So he fought a couple of those. He trained. He got his nose broken and the jaw.
Mm-hmm.
So he retired from boxing, but his best friends were boxers.
Yeah.
And he started in the lowest level in a boxing commission. You know, he was the go do this. He was the assistant for the doctor. Then he was a timekeeper, ring announcer, judge, referee.
Wow.
He got to know everything that was happening in the sport, and he saw the abuse that the fighter had to live with. If there was no gate, they would not pay him, or he had a broken nose, they would pay him 10 pesos that does not even pay for that, no insurance. So all his life, he kept seeing what was wrong in the sport. When he was elected president in Morocco, in Tunisia, in Africa, he said, "The only way I accept the presidency is if I am able to implement the many changes." His first decision was to expel South Africa from boxing. Why? Because of the apartheid, the tremendous regime that had the horrible discrimination in that country. So he expelled South Africa. Muhammad Ali was expected to fight in South Africa. He was banned from doing so. And this 18-year-old struggle and fight led to the free of Nelson Mandela. My father received a citation in the United Nations. So just to make it short, he took the WBC and made it like a business. When you run a company, you have different departments that have to do specific things. Instead of just going and be a ratings organization and giving a belt, we decided to change. And that was and will always be the WBC's core value, to change boxing for the betterment.
Yeah, phenomenal. So he grew up in the sport, but you did as well. So you probably grew up around some of the biggest names, the Jose Napoles, the Julio Cesar Chavez, the Foremans, the Alis. How old were you when you first realized that you were surrounded by boxing icons?
I must have been 2 or 3 years old when I was home, and I heard the strangest noise, okay? So I run down the stairs, and I see my father in the living room with 2 huge men, and that noise was the laughter of Don King. And the other man with Don King was Muhammad Ali. So I grew up watching every day in my dining room, in my living room, Sugar Ray Leonard, Roberto Duran, Ali, Tyson, Holmes, Wilfredo Gomez, or amateurs who were just starting to dream. My father dedicated his complete life to boxing, and my family was in the middle of everything. Right. So the first time I went to a boxing match must have been same 2, 3 years old, and I cannot forget the impact of going at Arena Coliseo, walking in there, seeing people screaming and the smoke and the lights directed to a ring and 2 kids fighting, two adults fighting. I was like impressed. Yeah. I remember feeling fear at the beginning, but by the second, third fight, I was completely in love with the sport.
Yeah. There's nothing that, I mean, I guess I'm a little bit biased, but there's nothing that matches the electricity, the raw excitement that boxing provides. There's no feeling like it.
There, you cannot, because there's no script.
Right.
You know, wrestling is sensational.
Yeah.
It's very emotional, and you see what happens. In boxing, there's no script. You can have a dull fight for 10 rounds, and then the last 2 rounds, the last round, or the incredible exchange makes it worth.
Yeah.
It's a sport of intelligence, sport of tactics. For a fight, you have to prepare yourself incredibly. Whoever has not trained boxing cannot understand it. When you train and you know that you have to run 12 miles and then go to the gym and then be there 1 or 2 hours with a very sophisticated system to learn and to practice. And then you go in the ring, because just by itself, just having the gloves on and moving around, it's tiring. But when you have someone wanting to put your head off with a punch, that gets more tiring.
It's funny you say that, though. I've always called it the theater of the unexpected, because anything can happen. Like you say, it can play out for 11 rounds, and one shot turns the whole thing around or ends the fight.
Yes, and we have seen unbelievable knockouts this year. I don't know if you saw Povetkin knocking out Dillian White.
Yeah.
Was unbelievable. And this past weekend, Gervonta Davis, the way he knocked out Leo Santa Cruz was so dramatic. That's when you realize what boxing is. It's a very timely sport. You cannot make one single mistake.
That's for sure. Your father, so let's talk about him a little bit more. He was very boxing focused, but also very family oriented. How has his work ethic, his love for the sport formed who you are as a father, a fan, the president of the WBC, and just an advocate for the sport today?
You know, he was a unique man. He was out of this world. He was an unbelievable, heartwarming person. He could not take no for an answer. He could not say something is impossible. Nothing is impossible. It takes a little bit longer, but it is possible. And he could not be part of any injustice. He suffered many times. Boxing is a complicated sport with many interests that go in the business, and he had to always rely on his firmness to justice. He fought against discrimination. He fought against abuse of power. He fought for integration, and he was just a very special individual. Our sport was baseball.
Really?
We played, the 4 kids, we played in minor leagues, little league, and then minor leagues. I represented Mexico in a World Cup in 1982. So baseball was our sport, and he was the manager of the team. He had his company, his manufacturing company in Mexico. So if you add what he had to do as a business, because boxing is not the business of the Sulaimán family. Right. We do not live from boxing. Every penny, every cent made from the WBC goes back to the sport one way or another. Oh, wow. And we have open books. We have the non-profit registry in the USA. So everything is transparent. So my family is industrial. We have manufacturing companies. So my father dedicated for that, for the company. Yep. Then president of the WBC. Then he was the president of the baseball league. And he also used to take photography. His passion was photography. Oh, really? He was a great photographer. So he lived 24 hours a day. He didn't spend a second. He didn't drink. He didn't smoke. So he was very work-oriented, and his great passion was to be with his family, yep. to serve others, to be the difference to others, even against our own. I always used to tell him to why would he go and be with someone that called him that needed something instead of being with us with the family when he's working so much. But he's remembered as a great person, as a lovely person, a big heart, and he was visionary. He could never stop thinking about how to make things different, make things better, implement whatever had to be done. Because anything that is done where you see boxing in a newspaper, in a news channel, in television, in a movie, is good for the sport.
Right. Sure.
That's why we get into so many different things, not only the fights, because we promote the sport for the betterment of the promoters, of the fighters, and the industry.
It seems natural that, again, for his passion for the sport, but also you growing up in it, that there would be that succession that you would take over for him as president of the WBC. Do you remember, was there a certain time or a specific moment when that discussion first started to happen, or when it just became obvious that that was going to be your path?
Well, it's very funny because, in fact, my father was completely against me being in the WBC, and we never considered that I was going to be the president of the WBC. What happened when I was very little, he took on me. As I said, he would bring me to the fights, bring me to the press conference, to the TV studios, and I just got in love with the sport. And I started very early to help him out, to make phone calls, to take messages. When he was president, there was no cell phone. Right. There was no internet. There was not even fax. So it had to be a very complex work with a great discipline. And I started helping him and taking care of visitors or doing different letters, blah, blah, blah. When I graduated from college, because my father was my hero, so I studied business administration just as he did. Mm-hmm. When I finished college, I went directly to the company, to the factory. And that allowed him to free much of the time that he had to give to the company to go out in the late 80s and early 90s, to go out and just do the WBC and his passion. So even though I was very close to my father, for many years I just dedicated to the company, but at the same time I would do boxing, different things in boxing. Sure. But he would always say, when there was something, please go to the company, don't get involved in the sport, blah, blah, blah. But then half hour later, he would call me. Oh, please call Don King and do this, or call, do whatever. So it was very confusing. Yeah. Time continued to pass. And then in 2006, he got cancer, prostate cancer. That time when he had the radiation process 4 months in Los Angeles, I took upon filtering many things, because cancer makes you very tired, the radiation. Right. So I would filter everything. I took away the computer and the phone. I will filter. So I got much more in that period into the high-level administration of the WBC to help my father. Right. So without knowing it, I got into a position in which I was in the day-to-day of the WBC, but never challenge or threaten the position of my father as president. Mm-hmm. When he passed away, I firmly believe that my duty in boxing had finished, that my life in boxing was finished. And when we were in the funeral home in Mexico, it's a very fast process. In the USA, you do it 3 weeks or a month later. Mm-hmm. In Mexico, when you die, it's 1 or 2 days and then you're buried. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Or incinerated. So many people started traveling from all over the world to say goodbye to my father. We had to extend to 4 days. and we had thousands of people visit us. The funeral home has, the one that we were on, has 20 different chapels or places for 20 different persons who died. We had to take the whole building. The amount of flowers, the amount of visitors, it was just unbelievable. And my mother told me, she said, look, that's the life of your father. That's the WBC. You cannot abandon what the WBC meant to him. And what do you, I mean, it's irresponsible to do that. Right. So I said, absolutely right. I thought I was going to continue as general secretary or lead some of the committees. But a month later, there was a meeting by the Board of Governors and they elected me president. And here I am with my father inside of me, guiding me every single day with a great influence.
It's fascinating. So it was more organic and by accident and probably fueled by the fact that you saw at the end of the day, the impact your father had.
Yes. My motivation every day is to wake up and perform the way my father would expect me to perform or the way he would do the things. Yep. And then go to bed thinking, hoping that I did it honorably. Yeah. So I have a legacy to fulfill, a legacy to maintain a name, a reputation, and my worst nightmare is to do something that would hurt the name of Jose Sulaimán.
Before we move on, I want to ask you, just before we get away from your upbringing, do you remember, I mean, you've met and been around every fighter anyone could imagine. Is there a certain fighter you met as a kid or experience that you had that looking back, you feel maybe made the biggest impression on you in this sport?
Sugar Ray Leonard.
There you go. Oh, I love that answer.
My hero. I mean, I used to dream and I was so into Sugar Ray Leonard when I was a kid. Unbelievable.
That's great. I mean, that's actually the reason, that's what got me into boxing. I watched the 1976 Olympics as a 14-year-old kid and I was hooked. I mean, just that, the entire team, but his performance especially. And it was just, I mean, you watch that and just the excitement, his personality, and just, again, the performance of that team overall. And I just knew I had to get in the sport and compete and be involved in it some way.
Yeah, he was magic. He had everything, the looks. And usually when you have a good looking fighter, he doesn't really have the ability, and he was fast and he had power, he had a good chin, big heart. He was just magic. He had it all. And still is. He's a great person. Sugar Ray, I love Sugar Ray Leonard.
He really is a great guy. Is there, in your recollection, is there a moment in time that was the WBC's kind of coming out party where they really come out of the shadows? Was there a specific fight or just something that brought the awareness of the WBC to the forefront of boxing?
It has to be the 60s and 70s. The WBC with the Muhammad Ali era, with the George Foreman, Joe Frazier era. If you go back in history, because these are things that are not even written in books. Right. And I hope we can write a book and tell these stories, because if you talk to George Foreman, Muhammad Ali was out of the ring, Joe Frazier was a champion, and they fight in the biggest event in the whole world. 1971, March 8, 1971, the greatest event in the world. So George Foreman was a mandatory contender, okay? And they wanted to do the rematch, Ali-Frazier. And my father fought so hard with then president of the WBC, Mr. Velasquez, to respect the mandatory fight of George Foreman. So if you call right now George Foreman and tell him to tell you this story, you'll be, I mean, you'll be blown out by the way he tells it. And the fact is, Fraser fought Foreman, and he became champion, knocked him out, knocked him down 7 times, blah, blah, blah. That's the history.
Yeah.
And then, for example, Ken Norton. He was the mandatory contender. Ali fights Spinks, and he loses to Spinks. And they wanted to do the rematch again. So my father was already president. They come to him and say, let's do a rematch. So my father says, do a step aside with Norton. Tell him, offer him, ask him to wait. If he accepts, then we have no issue. We accept it. So they offered a large amount of money to Norton to step aside. And he said, no way. I want to fight for the belt, because Norton fought Ali 3 times. He beat him once when he was not champion. They drew, and then he lost a controversial decision when he was champion, when Ali was champion. So he was ready he wanted to become world champion. And he said, no, I'm fighting for the title. Spinks, bring Spinks. So they said, okay, what we can pay you for that fight. And they offered him a ridiculous amount of money. And he said, okay, I'll sign the contract and fight Spinks tomorrow. They never called them back. They went on and did the rematch, Spinks Ali. Wow. So the WBC ordered Jimmy Young and Norton the title, and then he fought Larry Holmes in one of the greatest heavyweight fights, etc., etc. Right. So those times where the WBC stood firm, brought the greatest boxers, the greatest champions, and the respect to the organization. Yeah. There have been many, many great moments, great fights. When I look back at the 70s and the 80s, it's gratifying. But today, the WBC is on top of the world because we have such a great platform. It's a network of hardworking people from all over the world who love boxing. And I would say the greatest asset that we have relies on our champions, our former champions, our current champions. The intimate care and love they have for the organization is what speaks of why the WBC is the green and gold belt.
Yeah, I want to come back to that and talk about some of the current champions and people that maybe represent the WBC on a larger level. First, I want to address a couple of the biggest issues in boxing and some of the current initiatives. You partner with VADA, the Voluntary Anti-Doping Agency, under the direction of Margaret Goodman, and it's really just random drug testing to make sure that no athletes are using performance-enhancing drugs. Why? My question is this: it seems pretty. This seems like a no-brainer, but why would all sanctioning bodies not mandate that and force their champions to be a part of that system?
That's a question that I cannot answer for others. What I can say is that we met with Margaret Goodman. We partnered with Margaret Goodman, and we share the love for boxing, for boxers, for fair play, and for the integrity of the sport. What this program is costly. It costs a lot of money to run and to maintain, and it costs a lot of headaches. Every time my phone rings and I see Margaret Goodman, I start shaking because most of the times it's about a doping problem. Sure. So we have lost great big fights due to a doping situation. But we have stood firm, and we have the integrity, and the more testing there is, the safer our sport will be. I would encourage anyone who is involved in boxing, who can have authority to make tests, to do so. The British Boxing Board of Control, they do their own testing.
Right.
Some states in the USA provide random testing to few fighters. Some promoters have their fighters be in testing protocols, but it's very little compared to what it should be. Let me tell you the story, the history behind drug testing.
Great.
Do I have time or I'm talking too much?
No, we're good. I love it. This is the kind of information the boxing public need to understand what goes on behind the scenes and the whys and what fors, because otherwise they're making assumptions, you know?
Okay. Back in the 70s, no sports organization would perform anti-doping tests. It simply did not exist. And the WBC instituted the mandatory anti-doping tests to every single championship fight. Why? Because my father was in Venezuela watching a fight, and it was a Philippine fighter against the Venezuelan hero, and my father sees in the corner of the Filipino fighter, they bring this small bottle, and he drinks from that, and they put it aside, and they had the water bottle, so it's a different bottle.
Mm-hmm.
So my father ran to that corner and confiscated the bottle, brought it back to Mexico, and it had amphetamines.
Yeah.
So the fight was reviewed, blah, 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 blah. But from that came the idea of doing anti-doping tests, because amphetamines are clear. So you can put it in water, you don't know there's something. So when you drink something during the event, it gives you an advantage and it's dangerous. So that's how the WBC instituted mandatory anti-doping testing. But doping is much far complex and much far ahead of the testing.
Sure.
It's a very complex situation, mostly in Olympic competitions, but there's doping in all sports, baseball, football,
Sure.
boxing. And that's why we implemented, in addition to the mandatory test, which takes place after the fight, we do random testing to fighters who are ranked in the first 15 in each weight category, men and women. And it's been a great ride. We have had great success stories. I'm going to tell you one. David Benavides wins the title, 19 years old, young, becomes champion. With a champion comes fame, success, money, and temptations. So we perform an anti-doping test out of competition. He did not even have a fight planned, and he turned out positive for cocaine.
Oh, wow.
We intervened. We did not just simply put him out and take him away. All to the contrary, what we did was take him to a psychiatrist, psychologist, doping officers, and he moved to another state. We changed his environment, and his team was very cooperative. Well, he came back and he won the title and became champion again, and he is completely free of drugs. So that's a great success story that, if you ask me, that by itself is one life that we saved, because at 19 years old with money and with an addiction, I don't think where he would be right now.
And all the temptations in the world when you're at that level. Yeah. So is that then the answer, that what you hit on from the very beginning? All organizations don't do it because it could ultimately cost them sanctioning money or dollars, just because a fight doesn't happen or a fighter relinquishes their title?
I don't want to pin down a reason. What I know is that it costs money. It costs a lot of work, because we have 3 dedicated staff contracted to administer the program. You have to continuously update the whereabouts, do so many things to continue running the program. And then it costs a lot of money to pay for the tests. And also you lose fights. That's a a reality. You are in the possibility of losing the money that comes from a sanction fee from a fight. But maybe they have not been open to contemplate making an addition to the programs. The thing is, it really takes a lot of work.
Yeah. Well, again, unfortunate though, if that's the case, they're putting money in front of fighters' well-beings, not only the fighter that's doping, but the one that's on the receiving end of it, which is probably more important and more dangerous.
Yes, and we are trying to generate different scenarios where we can teach fighters and trainers. Many doping violations come from ignorance.
Right.
Someone recommends a product and they take it and they don't know they're doping. And some come from bad intentioned people that are putting products into the gymnasiums. But to say that boxing has a real problem in doping of someone manipulating and trying the fighters to cheat, it's not such the case, but it really exists. We have to be very much aware, and the most important thing is to teach every individual what happens when you take those drugs. You may win the fight and you may be successful, you may be the champion, you may not get caught. But what happens to the liver, to your kidneys, to your heart?
Right.
That's the thing that we are mostly concerned that they must be aware of what is happening.
There are definitely long-term ramifications that many fighters and the people around them who maybe don't have their best interests at heart always tend to ignore. Yeah.
Of course.
And that leads me to the other one, the other program that I really like, which also has a huge impact on a fighter's health and well-being down the line, maybe not immediately, but down the line, whether it's amateurs, but also more prevalent in the pros, is your weight management program, where you weigh a fighter 30 days out, 14 days out, 7 days out, and then also the implementing the 10%, not being able to gain over 10% of your body weight between the 24-hour weigh-in and then the day of the fight, which I really like. And I wish everybody did that, because that one makes a total sense in just a fighter staying within his weight category and being, being as safe as possible, rehydrating, but not, taking advantage of the situation.
Yeah, weight is, and I think will always be the biggest enemy, the most dangerous opponent for any fighter. Why? Because it is naturally that you go and after a fight you blow up, and then you have to go down. Many fighters are not fighting within the weight category where they should be fighting. So what we do is, once there's a fight announced, we get the weight they're walking in, then we do the 30 days, 14 days, 7 day, and then official weigh-in a day before. And then when they get to the arena, we weigh them again. Right. And we are using all this information to have tendencies and to have more robust policies of weight management. We are trying to implement the random weight checks. You don't have a fight scheduled, it's good, you're home. So as we do doping, we can also knock on the door and see what you're weighing.
Right.
So if you are weighing in, 20% above your fighting weight, is way too much, but that's the limit. If you are over 20%, if you're over 15%, it's a clear statement that you should not be fighting in that weight category.
Right.
There are many fighters who are disciplined. You look at Hopkins, at De La Hoya, Chicanito, there's many, but the few who are very overweight by the time they get into the ring make a great concern, because it's a tendency. Fighters should be fighting in a weight category where they are safely making weight.
Well, it's dangerous. but at the end of the day, it's dangerous for the opponent to be at a 20-pound disadvantage in many instances. But again, this also requires, you can't just say as the WBC, this is going to happen. It requires the cooperation of the promoters, the boxing commissions, and they don't always, and even the fighters. Sometimes, I don't remember who it was here a while back, the fighter just said, I'm not doing it, and I'm not doing that the same day, the weigh in the day of the fight. And it's unfortunate everybody can't get on the same page for the betterment of the fighters to adhere to this type of program.
Yes, we have proposed to the ABC, the Association of Boxing Commissions, to put this into the rules. You know, the rules that are used for championship fights are they're very few. So there's so many protocols that could be introduced to boxing, but the problem is it generates work, additional work.
And
for the promoters, for the managers, for the organizations, for the commissions. And that's when you run into a comfort zone that others do not want to move from. Same in the weight management program, we have a specific staff working diligently, and we do this for world title fights, for silver titles, for international, for women's boxing. So it's a very complex, robust database that we run in this respect.
But also part of that isn't part of your motivation to do that is to gain a database and a knowledge, education about, where that cutoff point is, what's good for fighters, what's maybe unhealthy for them. When an accident does occur in the ring, did the weight gain or weight loss play a role in that? Isn't that part of your whole philosophy and your whole desire to do this?
Absolutely. The data over the years built stories that tell you a great solution. And that's where we get the changes. We are implementing a new weight category starting this November. It's going to create attacks from the traditionalists.
Right.
People say there are many divisions, there should be less, there should be many, blah, 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 but they will attack. But we don't care about the attacks. This is not a popularity contest.
Right.
We have studied for several years the fact that human beings have become bigger and larger and stronger.
Right.
Do you know how much Jack Dempsey weighed when he was a heavyweight champion?
Around 210, I think. If that.
Not even that.
Not even that.
No.
Oh, I should know that.
180,
I'm a huge Jack Dempsey fan. I should know that.
Yes, and we're going to put out a paper which exemplifies
Great.
Jack Johnson, Rocky Marciano, 180, 190. Mike Tyson was 210, 215 for the beginning of his career. And today, the heavyweight champions are 250, 270. And there's a large amount of fighters, small heavyweights or big cruiserweights that range in that area that they have to give too much advantage to compete against the big heavyweights. So the heavyweight division is going to remain the biggest one, and we're implementing one between cruiserweight and heavyweight.
Oh, there you go. That's an interesting approach. Most people would have said add a category at the top.
No, the heavyweight champion of the world has to be and will always be the greatest prize in sports, the strongest man on earth. So we will not touch the heavyweight. We are introducing one between cruiserweight and heavyweight for those small heavyweights. And
where will that weight category cut off at?
It's going to be 200 pounds to 224 pounds.
224. Okay, interesting.
And once we establish this, next will be to reduce the cruiserweight. Because from super middle to light heavyweight, you only have 7 pounds difference.
Right.
168 to 175. From light heavyweight to cruiserweight, you have 25 pounds. That's a big area of concern.
Right.
So first we're gonna. I mean, if we take too many changes right now, it will get difficult.
Right.
We're gonna establish this new weight category, and then we're gonna look into the light heavyweight, cruiserweight, super middleweight to make less difference, because 25 pounds from one division to the other is too much.
What will that weight division be called?
It's gonna be called, and this is nobody knows. Okay.
Well, okay.
But now you know your audience.
Are we gonna be nice? I love being first.
Yeah, this is the first. It's a Bridger weight.
Bridger weight. Okay. Cool.
Two reasons. Yep. One, the meaning of the word. It's a bridge. Mm-hmm. Okay. From one point to another. Yep. So this is a bridge where an Alexander Usyk, 217, right. Perfect for this weight category. Right. He can get stronger and then be compete in the heavyweights. But it's an inspiration on Bridger Walker, mm-hmm. the kid who saved his sister during this pandemic era, and brought a great story of inspiration to humanity.
Clever. What a huge honor for him.
It's a recognition to Bridger Walker. We're going to name him because it came exactly at the same time we were in the final steps of the research. So somebody just said Bridger weight, so it's going to be Bridger weight.
It's funny how those things happen, right? Just destiny.
He doesn't even know.
Yeah, it's great. Well,
I got to call him and
we'll tell you to watch the podcast. Well, it's interesting because, back in the day, you bring back, you got a guy like Primo Carnera, he would be a normal heavyweight today. Where back in the day, he was a giant.
Giant, exactly.
Yeah, maybe this will also.
Yeah, we have a lot of data about this of the fighters, what weight they have competed in, and it's just something. This is for safety. And it's also an opportunity for a universe of fighters who give too much advantage.
Yeah, I love it. Will that information be available to everybody?
Yes. We're going to put it out next week.
Great.
With a press release and all the data that comes from.
I love it. Well, that might also make the cruiserweight division a little bit more interesting. I've always wondered why it hasn't gotten more spotlight and more attention. It just seems to have always fallen by the wayside. And I wonder if that will if you widen the amount of fighters that can fight in that division, if it'll to make it bring a little bit more attention to it.
Yeah, the cruiserweight has been a great division, but very underestimated.
Right.
If you look, Vander Holyfield was a great cruiserweight. Usyk, tremendous cruiserweight. Tony Bellew. Right. And if you look at the history of that division, you can see great talent that eventually came into the heavyweights. If there was no cruiserweight, those fighters would have never made it to the heavyweights.
That's the thing. It's always been kind of a stopping point. It's like been a bridge up to this point. It's been just like, I'll fight cruiserweight and then I'll move on to heavyweight. Very few fighters have just said, I'm a cruiserweight.
Exactly. Now it's a.
Yeah, it seems like with Holyfield, Michael Moore, Virgil Hill, I think he used cruiserweight after he fought light heavyweight. So yeah, but again, it's never been somebody's real home, at least some of the greater fighters. So I want to getting back to the weight thing before we get off of that issue. We did run into this here recently, and maybe you can give us some insights into the David Benavidez fight and him running into this. And, he didn't make weight for his title fight. But also some of those circumstances may have been around fighting in a bubble. He didn't have access to proper meals, sauna suits, access to a sauna, et cetera. How much of that is an issue in our current climate that we're dealing in with people being quarantined before fights, but also does that also shine light on a bigger issue that these fighters are, people shouldn't have to rely on saunas and sauna suits and all of those things coming into the final throes of a fight to make weight? So I guess just that's kind of two questions, but.
Yeah, it is absolutely correct. Unfortunately, the way 95% of the fighters structure their plan for a fight relies on the last week being very sensitive.
Right.
And that's the dangerous part. When you start eating, when you stop eating, and when you start dehydrating to make weight, that's the dangerous part.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, it's the way many fighters make weight. It has come down dramatically. It is not as it used to be, but Benavides is a perfect example. He was a victim of the pandemic. Mm-hmm. He was never able to train properly during several months. Then he goes into camp. And then when he goes to the bubble, where he has to get rid of the last 3-4 pounds, because he didn't make weight by 3 pounds. It was not that it's a big division, super middle,
right.
But very unfortunately, he only could train 40 minutes. I think it was the first fight in that bubble in the Mohegan Sun. Right. The food is different. The times and the quality of the food, and not having a sauna was dramatic. And also, when he entered the bubble, he had the COVID test, so he could not leave the room for 24 hours. Oh, wow. So promoters are looking into this and adjusting. It was one of the first events with the bubble, and I think he's a victim of what happened. And so many other fighters are being victims, because when you don't train as you are used to train, because many gymnasiums have been closed during this era, you cannot go out and run, or you have to run on a treadmill, or you have to do things differently, then it changes the whole comfort zone. And that's why we have seen a few upsets and a few lower than standard performances by fighters.
Right. Just new circumstances to operate under. Yes. Well, you brought up the conversation about too many titles, too many divisions. So I know Floyd Mayweather came out recently and said it brought up that issue that there are too many titles and it convolutes the interest in boxing, and it's a big money grab for everybody. Do you want to speak to that and what your feelings are on that? And I know you've probably talked about this ad nauseum, but I think it's one that resonates with boxing fans and boxing people is, why are there so many champions, and how do you know who the real guy is? And, how do we decipher, who is at the pinnacle of the game and who's got a belt that somebody handed him on a regional level,
Right. I can only talk for the WBC and for myself. And I cannot control what anyone other than us do. I was talking to my wife and my daughter a couple days ago because we had a call with her grandmother. And my daughter is 16 years old, and grandma said, "Oh, you should get ready to get married, okay?" My daughter is 16 years old, for Christ's sake. You know what?
You're thinking about that at that point.
80 years ago, 50 years ago, people would get married when they were 15, 16 years old. Right. People would get married at 20 years old. Now, that does not exist. So people from the older age see it natural. Right. But the reality is that today you get married when you are 25, 28, 30, 35.
You're getting older.
And it's a reality. You may have an emotional attachment to the past. Right. And it's that same emotional attachment to the past of the Joe Louis era. One champion, one division. Of course, and I understand that. But the reality today is that there are 4 organizations that are recognized by the world. Even though there are 20 or 30 more, Title could create a championship tomorrow. You could create the Title World Champion. And Disneyland could create the Disneyland World Champion. There have been many that come in and out and they just leave. At the end, right now, we have 4 recognized organizations. Why? Because it's a fact. The WBC has been since 1963, and we have done our best job to have the best champions. We have done our best job to have the best fights. And when you have so many champions, the quality of challengers dilute. So before you had a great mandatory contender, a great prospect waiting to get his chance, but now he can go to so many other places.
Right.
And that's when you lose the quality of challengers in many occasions. So we are facing reality, and what the WBC is doing is administering the WBC, which is the only thing that we can do.
Right.
We created a new concept, which is called franchise. And this is a very limited allocation to very few specific special fighters. This is not to be a new championship that it's in all divisions and gets more belts, more confusion. This was designed just for a very few fighters who move the industry, who are considered the best in the world and who can fight in different weight categories. So we implemented this for Canelo and Lomachenko. When Lomachenko requested petition for the franchise, it had a very clear purpose. Why? Because he wanted to unify the division. So he won the vacant title. Instead of fighting the 2 mandatories that a vacant champion has to perform, he went directly to fight Teofimo Lopez because the WBC franchise designation allowed that to happen. Right. So we had that great fight. But what happened in the lightweight division? Devin Haney, who is a champion, was able to defend his title and make $1 million. He's going to fight this Saturday and make more than $1 million. And then he's going to fight the winner of Luke Campbell against Ryan Garcia, who, by the way, are fighting and they're making big money themselves.
Some great fights.
So it's like a small tournament, very gratifying, and I take all blame of the franchise. If someone is confused or angry, I accept it, but I take the high road and I prefer to see Lomachenko against Lopez, to see Haney against Gamboa, to see Campbell against Garcia, and to see Linares against Fortuna. So I love what is happening in the lightweight division. If it gets confusion, well, it's not 1950 when you have one champion, but we have 5 great champions and far more great potential matchups in the future for that. So I understand and I take the blame and I take with responsibility, but this franchise designation has the goal to see the best fights happen for the fans.
Right. Well, ultimately, it's creating great matchups, and that's all that really matters at the end of the day.
That's the way I see it. That's the way the WBC sees it.
I love it. I wanted to talk about, before we wrap up here, I want to talk about, obviously, another thing, another big item that's in the news, and that's the frontline battle, which you have a WBC belt for, which is our exhibition between Roy Jones Jr. and Mike Tyson. How do you, I know you're a boxing fan aside from just the WBC. How do you feel about that as a boxing fan and also as the president of the WBC?
Well, it was maybe in March, April, I don't know, that a 15-second clip in Instagram blew up and went all over the world watching Mike Tyson doing a combination.
Yeah.
Everybody got excited.
He's wearing
So
a Title Boxing body protector, by the way.
By the way. So I spoke to Mike during these periods. We had a WBC talks and he was in the convention. So he eventually said he wanted to do an exhibition, and he wanted to do it because he wants to entertain people during these difficult times. He wants to raise money for charity, and being back training has changed his life.
It seems like
he fell into difficulties like we all do.
Mm-hmm.
He was heavily overweight like me, but he took back and started training, and boxing changed him.
Yeah.
And through him, many people will benefit, because many people have started calling Title and get equipment and train. So immediately we offered Mike Tyson, before Roy Jones was announced, before anything,
Right.
we said the WBC will fully support it. What we did, we created an unbelievable belt, and we make two, one for Mike, one for Roy Jones. So they're not fighting for it. We're giving them a special trophy because they are going into the ring and entertaining people. The California State Athletic Commission has to license them and perform thorough medical on both. And they will be doing, or they're doing VADA anti-doping.
Yep.
So we're fully supportive. Of course, excitement there is for them to see two great legendary fighters going to the ring together and for a good purpose, good cause. That's our point of view.
Well, and it seems like it's reinvigorated both of those individual fighters, but it's created buzz in the boxing industry, at a time when, like you said, we're needing it. Not like there aren't great fights happening, but the more things that can happen that generate excitement and some buzz within the sport, now's a good time for it.
Well, we will see November 28th. What happens? It's
That'll
going to
be I think a lot of people are looking forward to it, and the entire card's good, so it should be fun.
Yeah, Badu Jack, and it's a good entertaining.
Yeah.
And Mike Tyson wanted to have a few amateur bouts.
Oh, really?
Before the card begins, but with the restrictions of COVID, we don't know if it's going to be happening. But his desire was to also have amateur bouts being part of the program to generate attention, because amateurs need a lot of attention worldwide.
Right.
You were mentioning Sugar Ray Leonard. In his days, he would be on NBC or ABC live with a full arena. So I think I didn't mention it, but the amateur program is one of our priorities as well.
Yeah. Well, that's great that he's got his eye and his heart with that aspect of the sport, with the grassroots level.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, I would be remiss if I didn't wrapping up here, that I didn't bring up our partnership between Title and the WBC, which is exciting for me because I'm a boxing fan, but also just the whole approach around it. I think what makes it work and what makes it organic and natural is that I can speak for Title and say that our core values are very similar. We put fighters first in everything that we do. You'll see it in our materials. You'll see it in everything that we approach as far as safety and the equipment, but also just how we approach the sport from an amateur level and into the professionals and supporting those fighters out there. The safety of the boxer and respect for the sport are paramount. And in our conversation, and even leading up to this, that's what makes this such a real good partnership.
I am very excited, and I am speaking on behalf of thousands of members of the WBC from all around the world. Your company, as you say, shares the values and principles that we share. Your honorability and your dedication for the wellness of the society is paramount, and I love the way the product looks.
It's fantastic,
so
isn't it?
I'm very excited, and this is going to be very important because we are helping together many things happen.
Absolutely. I mean, even before the whole product line was launched, we get access, obviously, to all the equipment in advance to go take pictures on the fighters and video and all that. And I mean, the response was just through the roof. It far exceeded even my expectations, which is always, great to experience.
Of course, and this is just the beginning, my friend.
Absolutely. So what can anyone do that's watching or listening to follow the WBC, support you in your efforts, and following you in the progress of the company?
Well, we have a good, solid platform in social media. We have Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and even TikTok, which are for the youngsters. And it's at WBC Boxing. And we'd like to promote fair play. We like to promote brotherhood. We like to promote good stories. Yep. And I was talking to a reporter one day. He told me he reported on a fighter going to do some very nice actions in society, and he had 100 visits. And then that fighter got in a fight, in a street fight, and that got 1 million visits. Social media is oriented towards scandal or towards big actions, but also there's so many beautiful things, and we're happy doing what we do. And if anyone listening would like to join, get in the ring with the WBC and with Title, you are welcome. You can do it only if you like to be passive and just follow and see and maybe comment. Or if you want to become an ambassador, if you want to become a representative, if you want to become a member, you are always welcome, because there's many things that we do, from simple online things to greater hands-on activities in society. So you can reach out through the WBC, or you can write to me on Twitter or Instagram. I am at Mauricio Sulaimán or WBC Moro, M-O-R-O. We respond to every single comment. You can send me an email at contact@wbcboxing.com, and we like to have members. We enjoy, we have a great family all around the world, and it's sensational.
Well, I follow, and like you say, there's a good mix of everything from the casual fan and things that are in there to interest the casual fan, or if you're just a huge boxing advocate, there's plenty of information there for those people too.
Yes, there's always things going on, and we are multicultural. We are in 170 countries with the affiliation of countries, and so one day we can talk about Philippines, and tomorrow about the UK, and tomorrow about Mexico, and it's just all over the world, and always with a fighter being in the center of our conversation.
There's something for everyone. President Sulaimán, humbled to have had you as our guest. I'm personally looking forward to everything we're doing to work together. Anything we can do to make the sport safer, stronger, and better, we're all in for. And thank you for being a part of this.
I have been in many Zoom meetings, in many programs, in podcasts, and I can tell you, you should have your talk show prime time in the best network, because the way you conduct it is unbelievable. I really appreciate it, and thank you for it.
Thank you. It's all about the guest.
Thank you so very much, my friend.
Take care and be safe. Thank you for watching this episode of Title Unboxed. If you're anything like me, you can never get too much boxing. So if you'd like to watch more episodes, you can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and our Title Boxing YouTube page.